I'd like to keep this session a bit informal so that you could ask questions, ask for features, give me the feedback on the product. But what I wanted to talk about was the internal design of the developer tools and the way you could contribute to the developer tools, because you are all web developers, and I'm sure you will find the way Web Inspector and Chrome developer tools are implemented very familiar. Now, before we start, so here is the way that developer tools look like. So that's a timeline panel, and you can see the front end here running. Please, those of you, let's put it another way. Does anybody know for sure what technologies it uses for the front end implementation? If you know for sure, just raise your hand. Don't say what it is. Okay, no one knows for sure. So what would be your best guess? So what language, what framework, what library are we using to create this UI? Just shout it out loud. So text, Ext, no. Java, no. HTML, JavaScript, yes. So in fact, it's just a pure web app. Everything you can see on a screen, so all this rich UI with all of these controls is just a web page. And it's connected to the guts of the WebKit, and it's just showing what it is there inside. So let me give you some more details on that. We'll talk about a bit about Chrome and WebKit, so which is what, and what's their relationship. Then we'll talk about the developer tools architecture a bit, and it'll be easily understood by you because you're web developers. We'll touch the Web Inspector code style and the structure a bit, and we'll discuss the ways you could contribute to it. And I'll also share with you the plans that we're having. Now, the Chrome versus WebKit. So which is what? Well, the Chrome is a browser. Chrome is a C++ based application that runs tabs in separate processes. And these processes, we call them renderers. They run WebKit library to render the page, to lay out the page. So each of these tabs is a WebKit. Now, the way WebKit is structured is it has a web core. It's a multi-platform core capable of layouting HTML that has hooks into the network, into the rendering library, into the JavaScript engine, and it's just rendering stuff into an image. And then there is a WebKit layer that is adapting that web core to a particular platform. Now there are multiple WebKit implementations. There is a WebKit Mac layer, there is a WebKit Windows, there is a WebKit Linux, and one of them is WebKit Chromium. So that's the integration layer that Chrome browser is using to embed WebKit into itself. Now WebCore is pluggable. It can use a variety of rendering painting libraries, and we in fact for Chrome we use different library called Skia other than the original libraries used in Safari per se. There are also pluggable JavaScript engines. Original JavaScript engine within WebKit is called GSC, and that's a part of a WebKit. We're using an alternate engine called V8 because it was the first language to actually compile JavaScript into machine code. It was really, really fast and breakthrough in the engine's land. Now, this image has different colors. This blue one is WebKit and V8, and the dark red one is Chrome itself. So here's the terminology here. Everything here is open source. Chromium is open source, WebKit is open source, WebCore is open source. We call WebKit upstream because it is a different repository for us, for Chromium engineers. That's something that we take sources from. That's something where we contribute sources to. Most of the Chromium engineers are also working on WebKit. They are WebKit committers, WebKit reviewers. So it's a separate repository living in the track.webkit.org. Now V8 is also kind of upstream for us. It's a separate code.google.com project, which is an open source project. You can contribute to it. It's not necessarily a part of Chrome. It could be a part of a different either framework or a server-side application as well. Now the Chromium for us is a downstream. That's our source base. That's what we own. That's what we contribute to. It's also open source. We have contributors to Chromium from outside Google. Now how does that all play together? On a daily basis, we take WebKit, the latest version in WebKit, tip of the tree, and we integrate it into Chromium. So we roll the dependencies to the tip of tree of WebKit, and we're doing it several times a day. Every time this is done, we are updating all the layout tests, making sure that everything is working. In fact, it is a kind of a rotation within an engineering team. We take this duty of rolling WebKit dependencies time to time. Now V8 is somewhat similar. It is also being developed separately, and we roll dependencies onto V8. Currently, we do it roughly twice a week. Now, what this means is that whatever is being put into WebKit will show up in the nightly build of Chromium the same day, and it will hit developers channel roughly within a week, and then it'll hit beta, and then it'll hit release. So if you'd like to keep to see and get the latest and greatest of what's happening in WebKit and in Chrome, just stick to the developers channel. Now this is important for developer tools in particular because developer tools are essentially WebKit Web Inspector. Pretty much everything we do upstream. All the front end, the entire UI, and all the functionality of the web app that we have is a part of WebKit. So we're all implementing it there. It means you still can get developers channels releases and get the latest stuff that is being put there on a weekly basis. Now, here's how it works, roughly. To the left, you can see an inspected tab. So that's the page we're going to inspect. In the web core, there is a heart of the developer tools called Inspector Controller. It is a native class. It gathers all the information from all over the place in web core and feeds it to the front end. It also receives all the notifications, pushes them there. It also is capable of answering some questions such as, give me all the cookies or give me all the resources fetched, etc. Now the front end to the right, the developer tools window, is a web app. We have a thin binding injected into the JavaScript context that is called Inspector Backend. And the JavaScript code, when it wants to know something from the web core, it just issues a request to the Inspector Backend using a simple JavaScript call, receives that information, and renders it. Now on the renderer level, it looks like the following. Both inspected page and the front end, the developer tools window, are just renderers or just web pages. In fact, you can open developer tools in a separate tab via just entering cron colon devtools/devtools HTML, and it'll open the front end for you. Now these two pieces communicate over the IPC channel through the browser as any other parties within Chrome are talking to each other. So talking about the front end, real quick, we are maintaining WebKit JavaScript coding style. We are maintaining Web Inspector namespace. It's all pure JavaScript. We are using prototype inheritance, no frameworks, no jQuery, no Dojo, no nothing. The source, it's open source. You can find a source location here. We're using JSON messages. So let me actually show it to you. So here we go. We are inspecting google.com here. But if I press the same shortcut, I will start inspecting the inspector itself. So here we go. Okay, let me start over. So I'm running Chromium here. I'm using Command Option I to open developer tools for the google.com site. So it's just a shortcut. You could also do inspect element, and you get it here. You can use the same shortcut to start debugging developer tools itself. So it's still a web app. You can see the DOM for it. And you can actually, I don't know, let's see how, let me do some better layouting here. Let's see how the tree is implemented. Well, all of these are just divs. Let me select one. Here it is. So that's a huge DOM that represents the DOM of the source page. So this window, our front end, is nothing but a web app. I can explore UI here. Let me switch to the scripts tab. So whenever we do a release, we concatenate all the JavaScript files that we have, and it adds up into the 46K JavaScript file. But in the debug builds, they are all separate. And I can actually show it to you by navigating to the source code repository. So I'm navigating into the SVN repository for WebKit. And I'm opening the HTML page that is a front end. It'll take a while to fetch all the files because there's numerous JavaScript files there. They're still loading. But once they load it, it'll just render as a web page for you. Here you go. Network connection is not that good here. Okay, so that's our web page. And if we start debugging it, we'll see that here are our files. So if you'd like to implement something, for instance, add a functionality into the CSS sidebar, you could just go to the style sidebar pane and look at the code here. It's just a JavaScript web app, and I bet you have all the functionality required to provide additional data on the tracing of particular selectors here. You just need to gather it and render it. And we have some utilities. We have some basic trees here. We use modern HTML5 and CSS structures heavily. So let me actually jump into the inspector CSS file. So I have a huge CSS that has a lot of kind of non-primitive constructions that you've seen during the HTML5 demo. So the good thing for us is that we are targeting a single rendering engine, and this rendering engine is very advanced. So we are actually at any moment of time, we can target the tip of tree of the WebKit, and it's really powerful. And it is really as pleasant web development as you can get. Now going back to the slides, sorry, I closed it. Right, so the ways you contribute to the developer tools are following. If you just want a new feature and you don't really know or care whether it's a part of Chrome or WebKit, you go to crbug.com and you file a new issue. It's really simple. You just fill a couple of entries and you hit a submit button, and we will triage it. If you put a DevTools keyword there, we'll find it even faster. If you know for sure that it is a part of Web Inspector, it's a part of WebKit, feel free to submit it there. We will pick it up from there, and the URL for that is webkit.org, new inspector bug. Now we can look at the you can get the latest build to check whether something that you want to do is available already or not using the following two URLs with the continuous build or WebKit nightly. If that is about DOM or it is about network or about other places where we share functionality with WebKit, feel free to submit it into the WebKit or check it in the WebKit. If it is something JavaScript engine specific, of course, it'll be a part of Chrome. A couple of links on the build statuses and a couple of useful links on how to contribute patches. So these presentations are going to be available for you, so you'll just have a chance to get those links there. So yeah, so that's about it for the internal structure. Let me say a few words about what we are currently working on. And we're happy to be really open here. There are a few things that I mentioned during the panel. Firebug is a great product. Web Inspector is a completely different product. We'd like not to miss the great things that Firebug has that we're still missing. So feel free to submit those. And when you are submitting it or just joining someone's vote, make sure you star the issue so that we knew that people want it. The way we are addressing bugs in crbug, we sort them by the number of stars. So if you're voting for something, just put a star there. The other thing that we are working on is defining, so I mentioned that we are, the inspected page and the front end are running in separate processes. And all the information is floating over the IPC between those. Now, it's given that we have redesigned Inspector in such a way, it is almost free for us to enable remote debugging. Now, why do we think remote debugging is good? Well, first of all, remote debugging is good because it makes the protocol, the communication between two parties, clear. Second, it is great for embedded devices because you can actually attach to a running WebKit instance on a headset on an Android and start debugging it there. We'd like to see it happening. Extensibility. There are some things like FirePHP or any other thing, any other great Firebug extension that we are not capable of putting into a core product because it's either needed for kind of a minority of users, or it needs kind of additional pluggability, or someone wants to control the protocol that it supports. And we have a lot of demand for extensible developer tools, so that's something that we're working on too. Persisting user changes is a big thing for us. We have capabilities of changing CSS styles, HTML, JavaScript live, and it is all great. You can see the results immediately on the screen. Unfortunately, you can't persist your changes. So when you're tweaked your style in a way that you are satisfied with it, there are no good ways for you to export it and reuse this information within the real app. So that's something that we're exploring, and we think we'll do something new there. Profiling improvements. Now we have a wonderful JavaScript engine called V8, and it's a very powerful thing. We'd like to take most of it. We'd like to expose as much capabilities, debugging, profiling capabilities as possible. We're currently working on improving pretty much all the areas, all the functions based on V8 there. And the last thing that we are working on is Eclipse Plug-In. Now, there is a way for Eclipse to connect to Chrome, to running Chrome instance, and to debug JavaScript. So if you're using Eclipse as your primary IDE for developing front end, you can connect to a tab. It'll fetch JavaScript resources from the Chrome instance. It'll match them with your files in your project. You'll be able to set breakpoints in place of your app. It'll enable you to stop on those breakpoints, evaluate expressions on these breaks, etc. So far, it is working for debugging only, so it's very JavaScript centric. But we'd like to expand that to the whole kind of web core instrumentation capabilities. So that's it, and I really wanted to kind of leave some time for you to ask questions or to provide feedback and feature requests to me so that I could feel what are your pains and problems. So, thank you. Yeah, please.
You mentioned earlier that this is a HTML-based UI, so does this essentially mean I can use it in Firefox or any other browser?
Yes, it is. Yes and no. Yes, it is HTML, JavaScript, CSS app. No, in a way, we are using a lot of WebKit specifics from the tip of tree that are not necessarily implemented in Firefox. So you can try opening it up in Firefox, and it will somewhat open, but it'll all be garbage, so I wouldn't expect it to work well there. Okay, please. Pardon me? Will we be able to write extensions for Web Inspector? Right, so the extensibility theme is exactly writing extensions for Web Inspector. The thing is that we need to make sure that those are extensions that are working against WebKit, and there are many browsers that are based on WebKit, and a few of them have extensions capabilities. So we need everybody kind of to be happy with the API we expose and with the deployment schema that we choose. So it's kind of a challenge negotiation-wise, but we're making good progress there. So yes, you'll be able to do extensions. Questions? Yes, please.
The plugin that you mentioned for Eclipse, is it available?
Is the plugin for Eclipse available? Yes. If you look for the Chrome DevTools project at google.com, at code@google.com, it uses the same name as the integrated functionality, Chrome DevTools. You'll be able to download Eclipse plugin. Yeah, please. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go on. That was the first. Yeah, please. Okay. Right. So why didn't we use Clojure or something? Why did we use why do we use raw JavaScript? So it's really not us making this decision. Web Inspector has been a part of WebKit for quite a while, and we really picked it up in beginning of 2008, and there has been quite a few of functionality there already. Now we're thinking about writing it from scratch, but we decided to be good WebKit citizens. We decided to contribute rather than fork, and we've made the decision. We are currently kind of brushing up what's there, and we might migrate to something like CommonJS or Clojure or whatever, just to support namespaces and better visibilities. But it's just a historical thing.
Can I have a follow-up?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it's just basically a web page. Why not like use native client? Just the ID, right?
So why not use native client? Well, we are using. First of all, we are enjoying implementing in HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and we are dogfooding it. We enjoy the fact that we are using our own tool, and that's the only way we can say that it is useful.
Just take it out and then use native client only to communicate back on the ID. So the web page an extension, still web page, still the inspector, but use native client communicate back.
So the question is, why don't we use native client to communicate back and leave the front end as a JavaScript application? Well, in a sense, it is. It's just that we're using binding, not the native client to communicate back. I have a proof of concept demo running on my box that is connecting to remotely using HTTP and WebSocket, and we're just using WebSocket to communicate that information to the backend. Yeah, so please. Sorry about that. So we'd like to, so the question is, why do we use the inspector and expand it step by step as it evolves into some kind of IDE? Why not to provide the IDE itself? And the answer is, we'd like to keep focused. There is still a lot of demand in kind of Firebug-like functionality out there. We are making good progress in allowing remote debugging. Theoretically, in the future, if remote debugging proves to work well, we'll be able to expose protocols and allow alternative front ends, and anybody would be able to come up with the IDE that would connect to Chrome and provide the capabilities you are talking about. It's just that we'd like to be focused at the moment. Yeah, please. Do we have usability testing on UI? Well, given the fact that our dock and inspect element buttons are not discoverable, and all the Firebug users are screaming that we are not as usable as Firebug, no. But so yes, the answer is no, which is do what we like doing, and of course there are UX people that are that would tell us if we are going completely off, basically, but it's an open source project. It's a WebKit project. We have the original functionality back in 2008 for the kind of basic panels with the basic functionality has been implemented by the time we joined, and it kind of set the theme, the way everything is going to be implemented. We did not go through any kind of major redesign since then. We might do so, though. Why do you ask? Okay, so yes, for those who are suffering through the migration from Firebug to Inspector, just feel free to scream and shout out loud and submit bugs, and we'll be considering those. At some point of time, we decided that it is important for us to kind of provide you with the comfortable migration should you want that, and it's fairly high priority for us. Yes, please. Right. So the question is whether we are going to provide better support for Flash in the inspector, right? And currently we are doing not so good job in providing instrumentation for Flash, and we don't have any immediate plans on improving that. It's just kind of an unexplored area for ourselves. But if you submit a bug and it gets stars, we will be looking that way for sure. Yes, please.
Follow-up to that question. If you do only one thing involving Flash, I'm sure a lot of developers would love the ability to mess around with Flash cookies specifically and delete them because they're kind of hard to
Well,
just Flash.
right. So I don't really have good insight into that. I can't really say if it is easy or not to implement given the WebKit context. So file a bug and it'll get an investigation node and you'll have more details. Okay, questions? Yes, please. Right, so the question is both Apple and Google are contributing to WebKit in the area of inspector. How does collaboration go and how are the features getting into Safari as well, right? So the answer to that is that both companies are contributing to the WebKit. I'd say that Chromium is currently a very active contributor to the inspector area. Apple has been contributing to it actively before we kind of joined. I'd say that we are kind of driving most of the initiatives there at the moment, and but the original authors and contributors from Apple are doing a great job, and we have a bunch of third parties contributing to the WebKit as well. So it's just an open source project that various companies are contributing to, and is actually a good example of them kind of getting along well together. Talking about features getting into Safari, yes, every bit that we commit to WebKit is getting into Safari. There are some places where their JavaScript engine is not exposing capabilities that we could use, such as sampling, profiling, or live editing, or anything else. And in these cases, is just missing there. But all of the APIs are there, and I'm sure WebKit will just catch up really fast on those because they are interested in having comparable capabilities, obviously. But yeah, Safari 5 has most of the stuff that I've been talking about. More questions? No questions. Oh, yeah. Final question, please.
Have you ever considered making some kind of a connection between Inspector and Google Analytics? Maybe see the connection between the technical and
So we did not do that, and the short answer to that is it is hard to manage that from the WebKit playground because WebKit is kind of a Google agnostic. Why should it bother? Talking about making it a part of Chrome, we really didn't give it a thought. As you see, we've just started. We have spent a year working on the developer tools. We've done some good progress as we think, but we have a lot of stuff to do, a lot of stuff to catch up with Firebug, and a lot of new stuff to contribute. So it just might be not on the top of our list. Having said that, filing a bug would be a perfect way of starting it. Yeah, please. Okay, so is the slideshow going to be available? Yes, I believe so. So we'll find a way to communicate it to you. I'm not sure what the way would be. Twitter, yes, probably. So I guess I'll just save the presentation as PDF and share it somewhere. And okay, yeah, it is done using my corp account, so I can't really share it with you that way. But we'll find a way. Okay. Any more questions? We are actually finishing right in time. So thank you very much.